Okay, I would describe xenogenders as a gender that could not typically be described with terms such as masculinity, femininity, neutrality, androgyny, things like that. It's more of not how you relate to a particular gender experience, but more of how you relate to things. For example, cake gender. Um, I know a few people who personally use this. It's typically described as them feeling light and fluffy or sweet and warm, and it's not something that you could typically describe with the terms masculine, feminine, androgynous, etc. Another example of cake gender would be if someone feels like they have different layers or flavors to their particular gender.
So there's a university professor out there somewhere that's paid taxpayer money to come up with this shit. Like, let it sink in that there is a person working in the scorching heat, laying bricks, building houses, being a productive member of society, and the government takes away his wealth to equitably redistribute it and give it to the professor who comes up with this shit. So let me get this straight. Like gender, if I understand it correctly, is a societal norm. It's imposed by society, which means that people who do not conform to the gender get to be shamed by society, because that's how a societal norm functions. Like, don't be racist. If you're racist, you get shamed by society. And it's the same thing as like if you're a man and you fail to live up to the standards of the gender. For example, you do not provide for the family. The wife starts shaming, and it's like, what type of man are you who cannot provide for the children? But if you're cake gender, can society shame that person if they're not fluffy that particular day? Like, what type of cake gender person are you? You are not fluffy enough. You lack the layers. And like these genders, I mean, the traditional ones, at least the reactionary ones, they were built on years of negotiation between society and other individuals. This is why what it means to be a man can differ from country to country. But like these genders, they seem to be dictated top down from the university to the point where they're pretty much like clothing, I would guess. Like when you want to be a goth person or an anime enthusiast, you put on the specific attire, you put on the t-shirt with Hatsune Miku, you wear the Gargura cap so other people can identify that you're an anime fan. It's kind of the same. Like, why would you be cake gender? It's to show that you're a progressive, forward-thinking individual. It's not that you're feeling fluffy. I mean, like, a man can feel fluffy. I don't know what the fuck that is, but, like, it's a feeling, right? Like, it's a human emotion. I don't think, like, you need a particular gender in order to experience certain emotions from the human experience. Does that make sense? Experience human emotion from the human experience? Yeah, it does. Shut up. You know what I mean. I haven't slept last night. But it is becoming like fashion now. And it defies the point of why we have genders. So, first of all, the concept of gender is very recent, and it also comes from the academia. Like, people use biological sex up until like the 1950s, I think. Like, again, it's very recent. And then people came up with the concept of gender. And initially it was interchangeable, but now it's a Motte and Bailey tactic where it's kind of interchangeable, but it's not. Like, for example, with women's sports, it's not interchangeable anymore, right? Whatever. That's not my point. My point is, like, why did we have the concept of differentiating between what is a man and what is a woman? Well, it's to fluidify certain human interactions. Like, for example, if a man meets a woman, who greets first? Usually the man is the one that says hello to the woman. If a man meets a husband and a wife, well, first you shake hands with the husband, then he introduces you to his wife. Like, all of these cultural things, they are there in order to avoid misunderstandings. They're there in order to fluidify certain reactions. And they differ from culture to culture. Like in some cultures, for example, it's polite for the woman to say hello to the man. Just like the distance between two people. In some cultures, it's not polite to stay too close to other people. In others, it's fairly fine. But like all of these have evolved during hundreds of years, and they serve a purpose. And it goes even beyond that, right? Like when you have prisons, like you put the men separately from the women for obvious reasons that the progressives and the forward-thinking individuals now disagree with those reasons. Women's sports and men's sports and like a lot of these things, right? Imagine like if you can just change and hop from one gender to another and you have like a person that identifies as a cake and they commit a crime, where do you put them? I mean, do you construct another facility for cake people? Right? It doesn't make any sort of sense. And then you have like all the equity problems because all of a sudden they're like, oh, the wage gap is a thing. So if I would be a cynical boss and I really want to promote equity in my company and I have only men, right? I can just ask half of the men to identify as women on paper. I can even give them a bonus if they do so. Like that, in some places like Germany, that's how they want to do it. It's like you just go without any further proof, without any further identification. You go, you say you identify as a woman at the city hall, and they give you an ID saying that you're a woman. And then I can say, well, look, I hired 50% men, 50% women. There's no gender pay gap in my company. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. So there are people without honor, like dishonorable people, that will identify just to get the perks that from legislation that's meant to help women. Now, if you're a feminist, like J.K. Rowling, you're going to be upset about this because a lot of privileges are being taken away. If you're a cynical, patriarchal, cisgender, right-wing individual, you're going to like this because it's like all of a sudden you have equality. Right? Like if you're a man and you feel that society is unfair to you, well, you can identify as the opposite gender, you can identify as a cake. Again, you don't have to actually transition or be trans or anything like that because that's not how the ideology is working. Like all you have to do is to identify as whatever you want, like you change your piece of clothing, and then society is going to be forcing other people to treat you based on how you identify as. And we already seen examples where I think in Austria, a man identifies as a woman so he can retire early. Because they have this legislation there where women are allowed to retire earlier than men. So already there are people that are taking advantage of this. Like, again, cynical people. And they admit it. Like, they're not even hiding it. All right? Like, they're saying, well, this is the new method. This is the law you created. This is how you want the game to be played. Why shouldn't they? Again, like, it's not against the law. It's called malicious compliance. Because the law doesn't take into account that there will be people who will take advantage of this. And I'm sorry to say, but it's human nature to take the path of least resistance. Like, if you create the opportunity for people to take advantage of a system, they will. Like, in Germany, for example, as I mentioned before, they want to give IDs based on just how people identify. Like, no psych eval, no nothing, right? Like, they just go to the city hall, and they say, I identify as, boom, they give you an ID card. And at the same time, they want an initiative where they give extra money to what they call rainbow families. So if you're an LGBT family, you get help from the government. Why? I don't fucking know. What's interesting is that when the government wants to incentivize something, they give money. And when the government wants to ban something, they tax it. So in Germany, I guess like the government wants to incentivize rainbow I don't know why. Like, I'm not for or against it, but like what? Why are you doing this? It makes no sense, If people want to be gay, let them be gay. But like, why are you trying to force it in one way or another? Whatever, it is what it is. But my point is, if you're going to give money for rainbow families, and at the same time you're allowing people to identify as whatever gender they want, why do you think, for the love of God, that you're not going to have people who will just identify in order to take the benefits? Like, they're not going to be rainbow, but they're going to just be rainbow on paper so that they can take that money. So yeah, I guess they can identify as cake as well. I don't know. Maybe cake is a little bit too forward thinking. Like we're not there yet in terms of government regulations, but hopefully one day will be. I swear to God, I'll identify as a cake. Like the moment that's going to be available, so I can put it on my ID card, I will. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.